And let us continue with the 8 consciousnesses, and we have finished the first 6 consciousnesses. We should be starting with the 7th. The way we study consciousness is based on perspectives. The first one is the objects, how each consciousness perceives external object, perceives the world. So that's how we study how our consciousness, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our body, our thinking consciousness, sixth consciousness, how does each consciousness perceive external objects? What are these external objects? How do we perceive them? So that's the first perspective that we study. This is just a regurgitation. We always want to bring it back to the right track. How do we study it? Because it's so broad. These are each perspective that we have been examining. The second is modes of knowledge. How does each consciousness get to know externalities? And moral nature, wholesome, unwholesome, neutral. What's the moral nature of each consciousness? Realms of its activity. Where does each consciousness active? Concomitant mental functions. Each consciousness has concomitant mental functions at the same time simultaneously following it, not just its consciousness itself. We have been giving an analogy saying that each consciousness is like a king, and the king has all the ministers helping it to perform. So these are the ministers, and there are 56 ministers. So concomitant mental functions, necessary causes and conditions. For each consciousness to function, to work, there must be causes and conditions fulfilled to make it functionable. So we've been studying that. How does each consciousness function? We also study that. 8, spiritual transformation towards enlightenment. After studying each consciousness, that's the theoretical part, the conceptual thinking. How do we apply conceptual thinking to actual practice, to spiritual transformation of each consciousness, of all these consciousness, to wisdom, into enlightenment? And 9, leading sentient beings enlightenment. In other words, after your wisdom has been transformed from the polluted consciousness into wisdom, how do you, in addition to enlightening yourself, how do you enlighten all others? Because a bodhisattva is not just concerned about himself. You're always concerned about rendering compassion to all sentient beings so that all sentient beings will be saved from samsara, from life and death, from reincarnations. All right, so now first perspective that we're looking at now, for the 7th consciousness, the Sanskrit word of which is manas, vijnana, which is the 7th consciousness. Now we're examining the first perspective. How does the manas, the 7th consciousness, perceive the world? There are 3 states of the perceived world that the consciousnesses perceive. We go through that very quickly because we have gone through that before. The 3 states: the state of objects as perceived in reality. That's the externalities. There are 3 states, 3 perceived worlds by the consciousness. And the first state, the state of objects as perceived in reality, like your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue tastes actual real objects, right? Your tongue tastes food, your eyes see matters, materials, your ears listen to sound. All these are real objects as perceived in reality. That's the externalities. Real objects, that's the first state. The second one is the state of real objects distorted by imagination. They are real objects, but somehow your externalities have been distorted by your imagination. For example, your thinking consciousness, your manos. At night, you saw a thick rope, and then from a distance, you thought there was a snake. The real object is a rope, big about fibers. Yeah. And then when your eyes see it, interpreted in your thinking consciousness, you thought it is a snake. So a real object distorted by imagination. That happens all the time in daily events, in daily activities. We always distort the real object because of our imagination. There's someone that may misjudge. There's something that we bias. There's something that we discriminate. So they're including those objects. The first state is no discrimination, no rationalization. You just perceive as they are. The second state is you distorted it by your imagination. But they're still real objects. You just distort it. The third stage is the imaginary or illusory state of subject-object. That means actually you didn't perceive them, but it just happened in your mind that you create your own images in your mind with delusions. For example, you're sitting in here and you're thinking about Mr. Chan. There's no Mr. Chan in front of you. You're thinking of Mr. Chan and you hated him. And Mr. Chan, you thought that he looks bad. I mean, he's a cheater. So you create a lot of delusion about Mr. Chan. And Mr. Chan is not a real object that you saw just now. You just created it as an image in your mind. Did you always do that? Or you created yesterday's images and bring it into today and think about it and ponder on it. That's the reason why we always attach to past history, to past agony, to past happiness, to past jealousy. You always brought it back to the present, your illusory, imaginary state, and you ponder on it, and you hang on to it, and you attach to them. These are the three comprehensive external states of the perception of the external world. Any others you can think of? The Buddha exhausted them by putting 3 generalizations in here. Any other states that we haven't mentioned? You can talk to me if you have thought about any state. It is all comprehensive. It's all included now. These are the 3 states. Now, how about the 7 consciousness, the manas? The manas is perceiving which state. Our manas, our 7 consciousness is perceiving which state. Let's examine into that, because we're studying externalities, the first perspective, the objects. Now, then we know there are 3 states of the object, 3 states of the perceived world. It's not easy to understand the manas consciousness. It's very complicated. Because why? Because it's subliminal. What is subliminal? Subliminal is something that you don't realize in your daily life when you are thinking. Have you ever heard of many years ago they were doing some subliminal advertising? Have you heard of subliminal advertising? What is this subliminal advertising? An advertising on TV that it flashes very quickly in front of you. You didn't realize, you didn't see the images. You don't even realize that advertising exists, but it flashes subliminally, that outside your consciousness. But it flashes into your mind. That's called subliminal. You didn't know that exists, but it actually exists. It flashes into your mind. It is very subliminal. It is not obvious. The 7 consciousness, in Sanskrit, the manas, and in common English, is the ego, our ego devotion, our self-centeredness, our ego. You don't realize your own ego exists. You just think egoistically. You don't realize you have the ego. You have the bias in you. So, when we think of the ego, the 7 consciousness that we're studying now, the manas, we always have to have a very clear, before we understand it, because it's very difficult to understand ego. If you clearly know your ego, you'll be detached from it. It's difficult to understand. Then try to understand this. We have to understand what is the subject and what is the object. What is the perceiver and what is the being perceived. And let's get into that. Each consciousness has 4 parts to it. The subject being the perceiver, and the objects, the being perceived. Not just that. The objects being perceived, the perceiver, there's also the witnessing part of it. There is also the re-witnessing part of it. When each consciousness functions, all these things happen simultaneously. There must be objects being perceived, either real objects, imaginary, delusive objects in your mind, but there's got to be a perceiver. So the perceiver, the subject, is perceiving the object. But not just that, there's also a witnessing part to it. You may not realize it subliminally. And there's also a re-witnessing part to it. You may not realize it. It's not obvious. Let me give you an example. If I have a piece of cloth that I want to make into clothes, and then I want to measure, say, how many feet, how many inches, so that I can cut a pattern of clothes from it, a jacket or whatever, pants, whatever you name it. So I have my piece of cloth, then I have to get a ruler, right? The ruler measures the cloth. The ruler is the perceiver. I'm just giving you an example. The ruler is the subject that measures the object, which is the cloth. The ruler, ruler, how many inches, how many feet. Okay, you measure it, so the cloth is the object being measured, and the measurer, the ruler is the one that measures. So that's the analogy is that's the perceiver, and the cloth is the object being perceived. And then after you measure it, you say, okay, that's 2 feet 6 inches. Who said it's 2 feet 6 inches? The ruler said it's 2 feet 6 inches? There must be a witnessing part. Yes, it's 2 feet 6 inches. And then after you know it's 2 feet 6 inches, there is a hidden part saying that I want to reconfirm. Yes, it is re-witnessing it. It is 2 feet 6 inches. So in everything that you actually consciously do, there are 4 parts to it that you may not even realize it. It happened. But what is a little obvious than the witnessing and the re-witnessing is the perceiver and the objects being perceived. If you're weak in the witnessing, you know what you would do? Say you are a more senior guy, and you're measuring it is 4 feet 6 inches. Yes, 4 feet. Oh, you forget. You didn't witness it. You forget about it because your thinking is not strong enough. You can't remember. Oh, is it 4 feet 6 inches? Oh, no, do it again. The re-witnessing part is weak. So the more senior you are, the weaker is your witnessing and your re-witnessing. But you still have the perceiver and the object's being perceived. You still measure it. When you come to a point that you don't even know that the ruler, how to put your ruler there, your brain is ready to retire. So it happened that way. All right, so the subject and the object, that you must know. Next, the first 5 consciousnesses, they function neither continually nor assessingly. In other words, your eyes, your nose, your ear, your tongue, your body, they function, but they don't function continually. In other words, when you die, when you sleep, they don't function. When you sleep, your eyes still function when you sleep? Your ears still function? No. They are not continual. Neither are they assessing. Your eyes only see, it's like a camera to capture the images, but your eyes themselves, they don't know this is Mr. Chen, this is Mr. Lee, this is Jack, this is Jeanette, wherever. So the first 5 consciousness, they do not assess. They only capture the images and do a front-end assessment, which is not quite assessing. And they're not continual. They don't function continually. The sixth consciousness, the mana consciousness, it functions assessingly but not continually. In other words, your thinking consciousness, sixth consciousness, always assess. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this dangerous? Is this safe? This is ugly. This is beautiful. This is tall. This is short. This is poor. This is rich. Your sixth, your mano, always assess. And in the process of assessing, your mano is related to what? The manas, the sixth consciousness, which functions assessingly and continually. Because the sixth consciousness may die. When your body dies, there's no more sixth consciousness. But the seventh consciousness never dies. It always carries into the next body, the next life. It always assesses. But it's assessing subliminally, not obviously. You understand all this distinction? Continually and assessingly. They're not the same. And let's start to talk about a general concept before we get into the object of the seven manas consciousness. The manas consciousness, they have particularly 4 mental afflictions. And if you analyze later in concomitant mental functions, they have 18. The manas has 18 concomitant mental functions. How about the sixth consciousness? How many concomitant mental functions they have? Oh, 51. How about the first 5 consciousness? Concomitant mental function, 34. And how about this 7 consciousness? It has 18. Out of the 18, if we summarize the 18, categorize them, we can categorize them into 4 mental functions. Of course, we'll be talking about the 18 concomitant mental functions later. But generally, the 4 afflictions of the manas. First one is self-love. The love of the ego, your own ego. You love your ego so much. The second is self-pride. Pride in the belief that the 5 aggregates, your body, your perception, your thinking, your volition, and consciousness are self. You think that your body is yourself, and you're proud of it. You always maintain that. You believe that your 5 aggregates, your body, your mind, is yourself. The third one, self-infatuation or self-delusion. It is the ego infatuation confused by the belief in the reality of the ego. Self-view, the biased view of the ego. That ego is always, one way or another, biased. And some are more biased than the others. Some self-view is absolutely biased. Some self-view is leaning towards, less of bias and more of objectivity. So it all varies. All this self-love, self-pride, self-infatuation, and self-view, they differ from person to person. Not everybody is extremely self-love, self-pride, self-infatuation, and self-view. Particularly those like you who like meditation. Those who are like you who are seeking enlightenment. Those who are like you are seeking for wisdom. Those who are like you seeking for spiritual transformation. You, particularly this group of people, you know that there's a self that should be what? That should be analyzed, that we should detach our way from, that we should watch very carefully on what we're doing when we are egoistic. So they all vary from person to person. It does not mean that you're 100%. Some 100%, 80, The saint, maybe the saint on the lower scale, maybe 20%, 10%. Buddha, 100% free from this. Arahats, maybe 10, 20%. We don't know. So these are the 4 mental afflictions of the manas. The function of the 7 consciousness, the manas, which nana, is to continually turn his eyes towards the eight consciousness, the alaya, as self. As we said earlier before, in each consciousness, there are four parts. The most obvious are the perceiver and the state being perceived. In the seven consciousness, who is the perceiver? The seven consciousness, the manos, is the perceiver. What is being perceived? What is being attached to? The alaya consciousness, the eight consciousness. So, the seven consciousness is to continually turn his eyes towards the eight consciousness, the alaya consciousness, which is a storage consciousness, a self, and attached to it, leading our lives, your lives, our lives, to extreme self-centeredness and ego devotion. We haven't studied eight consciousness yet, which is the storage consciousness, storing all the energy, all the seeds in there. There must be a storage, otherwise when you die, where do you go? There's a storage in you. The same reason as when the keyboard dies, when the monitor dies, it does not mean that the computer dies. The disk drive is still there. The disk drive will go on. You're changing your front end all the time, you know. But you can't change whatever is inside. You don't want to lose it, do you? You can't change what is inside. The inside can carry on and on and on. You're changing just the monitor and the keyboards. So the main features of the manas, the seven consciousness, there are three features that we have to know. It constitutes a latent region of the mind that is not obvious and it is always functioning subliminally. You're egoistic and you don't even know about it. You act on the spur of the moment without you noticing it, expressing your anger, greediness, jealousy, hatred, arrogance, self-doubt, self-deceit. I don't know, so many of them. But they're good points too. They're wholesome mental functions too. Second feature is, it is always active without interruption. Your ego consciousness, the manas, is always active. It does not go to sleep. Even in your sleep, in your dream, you are egoistic. You are doing the dream. It does not stop. Only when you are completely enlightened can you eradicate your seventh manos, delusive, egoistic consciousness. That's what we're working towards. That's what the Buddha has achieved. The Buddha didn't get emancipation from his God. He did it himself. He purified himself. There's no God that purifies you. Don't dream about that. It's illogical. If God can purify you without you working at it, then you're already purified. How come you're still not purified? Third, it perceives alaya's perceiving aspect as the object, thereby always placing the I at the center of an event, rendering one incapable of being unbiased. You cannot be unbiased. You always have this internal commentator, as we said, inside of you, doing all kinds of commentary. It's just like when in the radio or in the TV, when two guys are doing a narrative of a ball game, the narrating say, one team, the other team, he liked particular team, then he will bias about that team or bias about certain player. Even the narrator, you think is objective? No, no one is objective. So, it always has been like that since many, many years ago. How many years? Millions of years ago, we've been carrying forward that kind of thinking, All right, let's get to the state of what state, because remember, how do we study consciousness? We break it down into 9 perspectives. The first perspective is, how does that consciousness perceive? So the 7 consciousness only have one external state that they perceive, the state of objects distorted by imagination. That is the 7 consciousness, the states, that the perceived world. The manas perceive objects and distort it. How? Perceive what? What is being perceived? Your ego consciousness does not perceive outside. Your ego consciousness perceive the perceiver of the 8. And just to throw in some information, the alive consciousness, if the alive consciousness is the perceiver, what is the being perceived of the alive consciousness? The being perceived of the alive consciousness is all the latent energy inside the alive consciousness, the body, and everything externally. That's the perceiver part of the alive consciousness. Difficult to understand. And the manas consciousness perceives the alive consciousness as self. And just to review, how about the first 5 consciousness? The first 5 consciousness only have one state. Your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, your body, only the state of real objects. The eyes see real objects, the ears listen to real sound, the nose smell real fragrance, the tongue tastes real taste, the body have real touch, have real interaction in between all the organs. So they only have one state. The first 5 consciousness only have one state of externalities that they interact with. The 7 consciousness only have one state, but that state is distorted by imagination, distorted by this egoistic thinking. And how about the 6 consciousness, the mano? The mano is very powerful. It has all the 3 states. Your thinking consciousness has all the 3 states. The state of real objects is perceiving reality, the state of objects distorted by imagination, the imaginary or illusory state of subject and object. The state of real objects, the 6 consciousness have that state. How? Through the interaction with the first 5 senses. So in other words, your eye see, which is the real object, and immediately it spontaneously work with your thinking to say, oh, this is Mr. Chen, I knew him, I worked with him before, he was my neighbor. Because the 6 consciousness stick into old files. Oh, here's my neighbor. I saw him before. He's my real friend. You know, the eyes don't know, but the 6 consciousness will interact immediately, spontaneously with the first 5. That's the first state. The second state, the state of objects distorted by imagination, which is the same state, the state as the manas. The 6 consciousness may misjudge something. May misjudge a hunchback old fellow at night to be a ghost. The eyes see that old fellow at night with a shadow, and then the 6 consciousness said, that's a ghost. But that's not a ghost, that's a human with a hunchback. The third one, the imaginary illusion state of subject and object, that happened when what? When you were meditating in here and you were dreaming. You're meditating, you were thinking about yesterday, thinking about your party yesterday, how other people embarrass you or you embarrass other people. You create a lot of imaginary images of yesterday's event, or you worry about tomorrow's event. But the state of objects distorted by imagination is the external state of the manas consciousness. And that contains 2 kind of states in itself here. Because that's further broken down to 2. One is called real state, and the other is called simming state, and the seventh consciousness is perceiving the real state. Here, real and simming is differentiated by whether it is mentality or dead objects. When it's dead objects, it's a simming state. When it is a mental related images, it's a real state. For example, if my sixth consciousness look at this computer, and I thought this is not a computer. I don't know what it is. Now, this computer is real. It's a real thing, but this computer is a dead thing. It's dead. It's not related to mentality. So they call it to be a simming one. Simming to be related to mentality. The real is, it really relates to mentality. It really relates to the mind. Because the seventh consciousness attaches to the alaya consciousness, which is absolutely mentality. But the sixth consciousness and also the five consciousness, they interact with everything, but they're not the mental, they're not the mind. They're dead objects. This is a dead object. This is created by the mind, of course, but it itself is what? It's plastic. It itself is not a mind. So it is not, it's just a seemingly a mind, a mental thing, but it's not. But that real state is absolutely mental, because the alaya consciousness is absolutely mental, because it contains all the energy, all the seeds, all the past history and everything and so forth. Let's take a look at the simming state first. The simming state refers to the sixth consciousness relations with external states or objects. In the Chinese language, is 以心缘色. The sixth consciousness distorts the perception of external objects. And the real state, let's take a look at the real state now. This refers to the seventh consciousness relating to the eighth consciousness by forcibly transpose the eighth consciousness, perceiver division, or the perceiver aspect into a self. The seventh consciousness forcibly transpose the alaya's perceiving aspect into a self. Our egoistic consciousness thinks that the alaya consciousness is a self. The mana consciousness attaches to the state of objects distorted by imagination. And that state is not the simming state, it's the real state. Because that attaches is to the mentality of it, not to the dead object of it, which the sixth consciousness sometimes attaches to the dead objects. Sound, they call it still a dead object. The sound does not have a mind, does it? The mind creates the sound, but the sound itself does not have a mind. The mind creates this, but it itself does not have a mind. I finished the first perspective, and I can only go that far. If we go deeper and deeper into it, then it would be very complicated. But then let's retract back, stand back and say, how does this thing help me? How does listening to all these help me? You always have to think about, how does the conceptual thinking help me in my practice? You think about it. How does it help you? By analyzing your own ego. By analyzing that your mind is always, some is continually working, some is not even assessing, some is continually as assessing, etc., etc.